Australia is well known for its lush greenery, prized reefs, and unique wildlife. It is also a country known for its rainy winters and soaring summers. Winter, June to August, is usually covered with rain. Summer, December to January, sees blazing, dry, or humid heat. But in recent years, many Australians have noticed a change: climate change. For some, the subject of climate change is controversial. But for farmers, especially in Australia's largest state, Western Australia, it is a reality that is threatening their livelihood. Greg Woodward, Eddie Zambonetti, and Victor Rodwell are three farmers in Western Australia with different views on climate change. But they all believe in the same thing. Their multi-million-dollar farms that have been around for decades are now at risk.
Last year is unprecedented. We haven't had that before. Not where a season starts so promising. In February we got rain. And then we got a little bit more in March. And we thought, well, this is too good to be true. This is going to be a wonderful year. But after the middle of March, we got no more rain through the autumn, through the winter, until the July, halfway through July. And all of our preparations, all of our spraying, all of our seeding, putting in new varieties of clover and ryegrass, it was all of no avail. It all died. We had to do the whole thing again. And that is climate change.
Greg is 74 years old, has one of Western Australia's largest and longest surviving dairy farms. He lives in Albany, the second largest city in the state, about 5 hours south of the main city, Perth. Greg's almost 2,000 acres farm was founded 63 years ago by his father, a British service settler. Farming wasn't originally a family business. Greg's father won a lottery and the prize was farmland. Growing up,
Roger.
Greg and his 6 siblings never worked on the farm. Greg was living his life as a school teacher when fate brought him back to the farm.
Father had trouble with his joints and had to have a knee operation. And my brother in the meantime realised that farming wasn't for him. I came home to the farm because Dad was going to sell it and I wouldn't hear of it.
The month and year was December 1978. Since then, Greg has worked on the farm, buying up 5 neighboring farms to extend from the original 500 acres to almost 2,000 acres. During that time, Greg met his wife Bronwyn and raised 4 children in the farm. He taught them the basics of farming to continue his legacy, but they were more keen on modeling. Greg and Bronwyn separated in 2007. His kids now live in Melbourne and Perth. Greg hasn't seen any of them in years. These days, the 1,000 cows are his family.
It'll be a sad day when I have to part company with the farm. It's not something that I want to do. I have ideas of even for its location and for its rainfall. You know, it would make an excellent training situation, especially for underprivileged people. You know, even if it was taken over by some sort of a government agency under the auspices of the Education Department and, you know, put to good use, rather than just having... Well, the thing is that the farm's too big for any one company to buy.
While Greg contemplates turning the farm over to a branch of the Department of Education at some point, Mother Nature may have different plans. Climate change could wipe out the business sooner. For farmers in this part of the world, changing temperatures impact their businesses in a myriad of ways. None of them are positive. Albany's weather is usually cool, less prone to sunlight, and boasts consistent rainfall. However, in the last 50 years, average rainfall is down by 20%, average temperatures are up by 33 Fahrenheit. Scientists also say the ozone is thinning. And in this part of the southern hemisphere, the sun's UV rays are particularly strong and only getting stronger. Greg says his cows grazing outside are exposed to the bright sunlight and are increasingly suffering from eye cancer.
Well, eye cancers in Frisian cattle 40 years ago, there was no such thing.
If the cancers aren't taken out, the cow typically dies, and Greg loses one more cow to milk. The rising temperature in the summers also impacts his cows in other ways. Cows are sensitive to heat and easily suffer from heat stress. A cow's ideal temperature is below 72 Fahrenheit. 73 to 77 Fahrenheit is moderate heat stress. Beyond that, it inches towards severe stress.
If an animal's under stress because it's overheated, it's not going to produce milk. And of course, an animal, just in the sheer process of digesting grass, it generates an enormous amount of heat just by its metabolism, without adding the heat from the sun.
The heat also affects the cow's fertility and the bull's sterility. When cows' heat load builds, their blood flows less to their uterus, and their sexual hormones are weaker. As a result, it is harder for them to get pregnant and have calves. Another issue is that pregnant cows have a hard time cooling down or absorbing less heat. This can lead to complications. Embryos can die within 17 days of pregnancy with temperatures over 95 Fahrenheit. The fetus inside also feels the stress and ends up with a lower birth weight. More pressing, pregnant cows can die from a weak or expelled uterus while giving birth due to heat stress.
If a cow is in labour for too long with a calf that is nearly impossible for her to pass, there's a danger that she will have exerted that much effort into trying to push the calf out that the membranes that hold the uterus in place will give way, and the uterus turns itself inside out and is expelled with the calf. And I'm afraid that's a terminal condition.
To avoid this prolapse, Greg intervenes and uses calf pullers to deliver. But he doesn't save all, as some give birth at odd times. It should be noted that Greg makes his cows calf year-round. On some other farms, cows give birth only half a year in the spring to avoid the blazing summer months. Yet Greg argues that the half year-round calving decreases the total milk quality of the cow. This is something he cannot afford, as a lower milk grade would cut his milk contract.
You ask the manager of any of the milk companies what milk they prefer, because the quality of the milk deteriorates as the cows get into the last sector of their lactation. And so that if you've always got newly calved cows coming into the herd, the quality of your milk as far as the components is concerned, and to satisfy the needs of the milk companies, remains constant.
Climate change also impacts Greg's cattle after calves' birth. On most farms, cows and calves are separated within 24 hours of birth, regardless of the weather.
Well, it sounds harsh, but a dairy cow is bred to be milked, and raising a calf is not on the agenda. If you leave them any longer than that, well, it's actually an act of cruelty, because they bond very closely with their calf after the first day.
The cows are sent to be milked for the young, and their calves are put into little cubicles for socialization. Cows and calves are incredibly sensitive. Separation after birth is difficult enough, but when combined with heat stress, it can lead to calves losing more weight, not eating, and abnormal behaviors.
You got to watch them so they don't get scours and just stuff like that, worms. And they get the runs, scour a lot. They get like a lumpy jaw underneath. They start to lose weight, so you sort of pick it all up and put things together.
Dominique Blash, a veteran cow biologist, points out that many forget that cows have emotions and personalities like humans.
Animals have good memories, so it really depends once again, it depends on the individual. There is a female animal that will recognize their young very quickly and get attached to them, and the bond will be there, and There's some mum that will not farm the palm at all and have personalities for sure. There's not too many more that are the same.
For Greg, climate change has also ushered in drought. Currently, the Western Australian government projects that agricultural drought months will increase by 80% by 2070. By 2030, there will be a 66% probability of drought in this area. For farmers like Greg, this translates to less water in his land. And Greg needs water to keep his cows' blood regulated, their systems running, and cooling down from heat stress every day. To run the underground water system, Greg has chosen to install solar panels at a cost of $50,000. He believes this will help reduce climate change.
If the alternative is to use electricity that's been derived from fossil fuels, well then of course solar panels are helping to prevent climate change.
The large solar tank serves a purpose.
With a big tank like that with some pressure behind it and a full tank, well even when 250 cows come to have a drink at the same time, it'll keep up with them.
But the pressure to produce a high and consistent profit still sticks in Greg's mind. As climate change has stressed all aspects of the farm, Greg does not have enough space for all of his cows to rest comfortably. He needs to sell more cows to leave room for the ones that produce the best milk. Greg sells his old dairy cows, the male cows, and the mixed breeds that he cannot use for milking as side profits.
We've only got about 35 beef cows. We had a lot more, but we sort of tried to cut back a bit to get more silage and have a bit more land so we could cut more silage and hay.
The process is tough on both farmer and animal. Greg's agent comes to the farm to grade the cows days before. In this time, Greg and his managers, Brian and Martin, brothers working under him beyond a decade, have to tag the cows, face aggression, sanction them in a paddock, and load them onto the truck. Rain or shine, the cows can bite them. The cows face more weather stress from their emotions mixing with fluctuations in the terrain. Rain thunders down over 1,000 cows, all unprotected. It is the peak of summer. For years in Western Australia, it did not rain during the annual show. This year, there was heavy rain and strong winds pounding through from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Just like heat stress is for heat, cows can also suffer from a low cold stress from the rain and wind chill. The condition of open enclosures with poop makes it less easy to insulate them. Yet, the show must go on. But while Greg suffers from climate change, he also knows farms like his are contributing to it with a gas, methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas that is 25 times as powerful as carbon dioxide. When cows digest their feed, the gas they burp out is methane. The West Australian Department of Agriculture indicates that methane emitted from livestock accounts for 56% of Australia's total emissions. Peter Hutton, the government's agricultural scientist, believes this can be reduced with the quality of feed.
Methane in Australia and New Zealand is higher than in a lot of Northern Hemisphere countries because we feed a lot of pasture. That sort of more indigestible feed means that more methane is produced.
Farmers can cut down the methane their cattle produce by feeding higher quality grains. Two such grains, hay and lupins, a protein grain. Both are expensive, both digest faster. But Greg continues to feed his cattle an East African grass known as kikuyu grass. Kikuyu grass is considered cheap feed. He defends that he can store the cheaper feed for a year longer using a process called pit silage. It is the fermentation of grass, and it preserves the grass's original quality.
And anyone in livestock who has excesses of feed at any particular time of the year, you owe it to yourself to make pit silage. And I can't stress that hard enough. The reason for saying that is that pit silage, covered with plastic and weighed down with car tyres, is there in perpetuity.
10 kilometers down Greg's farm lies Greg's close friend and beef farming veteran Eddie Zambonetti's farm. Unlike Greg, Eddie hired a nutritionist and is using technology to help his farm address the lack of food from climate change.
You ever want to hay?
No, not anymore. Not the way the season's gone, no.
Eddie Zambonetti took over his father's farm in a similar way to Greg. Eddie's parents came from Milan, Italy in the early 1950s and started a cattle farm. Today, the farm is valued in the millions, but the farm's legacy is at risk due to climate change, much like Greg's. Climate change in the form of a sharply changing weather pattern has made it impossible for Eddie to grow crops on his farm to feed his 3,000 cattle. Historically, Albany has been considered by farmers the place with the most consistent rainfall and cool summers in Western Australia, but it has now hit the below record level for rainfall, and summer temperatures are up by 33 Fahrenheit. By 2030, Albany will see a mean rainfall dip of 6%. As a result, Eddie relies on supplies instead, and has done so since 2001 when the weather took a turn.
It just stopped raining in August. Didn't rain for the rest of the year. It was green, but it didn't keep raining at all. It was very unusual. The main thing's moisture. They would have put on less weight. Like the cars would have been lighter than they should have been.
The decreased rainfall has affected the fertilization of crops and knocked down hay production.
We got 1/3 the hay yield this year than we did the year before.
The same. 17 was not a very good season for growing season.
Oh, because it just wasn't growing for some reason?
Too wet and too cold right through spring.
While Greg relies on his managers, Brian and Martin, to deal with the feeding for his cows, Eddie pays for an expert nutritionist to calculate the most efficient combination of crops to feed his cattle. The calculation is costly, running close to $3 for 2 pounds. One cow needs 1,500 pounds over 3 months. This costs $2,300 per cow. Henry and Eddie's calculations also take methane emissions into mind.
Feedlot minerals we supply contains an ionophore called rumensin, and that reduces methane production. So it actually reduces the amount of methane produced by the animal.
Eddie hopes a new scientific cow product might reduce the methane process.
Grain feeding does then grass is better, but yeah, they'll come up with an enzyme you put in the feed and it'll stop that methane from happening. It's pretty simple.
Currently, the government's research facility has discovered that a seaweed enzyme in the cow's diet knocks out methane by 99%. If more testing proves successful, this will be extended to cows and farms. Eddie has a different approach to combating the impact of climate change on his cattle than Greg. First, he ensures the feed and group system keeps his cows comfortable throughout the changing weather.
3 hours without feed is enough to give them a cook up.
Eddie feeds his cows twice daily, in the morning and in the evening. He processes his own grains and cracks them to make it easier for his cows to digest, with less heat intake and methane burping.
With cattle eat grain, it heats them up as well. But you're talking about 40 degrees Celsius temperatures and humid and stuff like that. Luckily, it doesn't. We don't
Have you had any episodes of that at all in the past 30 years?
No.
With his nutritionist's visit, Eddie examines how the cows, especially the new ones recently bought, are adjusting to one another.
Cattle that were inducted into the feedlot, they just arrived 2 days earlier. Lighter ones go out and backgrounded out in the paddock, and the heavier ones they just put in different parts of the farm.
The new cattle are moved into areas according to their weight and age. This is known as backgrounding. The idea is to get them acclimated to each other as a social group to knock down any stress, environmental and emotional.
If you put them straight into a feedlot with a lot of cattle, there's more stress and there's more problems. That's why you're better off backgrounding them first.
Eddie rearranges them, giving more space and feed. He gets his son's help to move the heavier cows ready for sale to the sanctuary to weigh them. The area is used to calculate cows' final weight and prepare them to be sent off to the abattoirs. Eddie sends his cows to the abattoirs of the major Australian brand Coles weekly. Each time they weigh less than expected, he incurs a penalty.
If you want a contract with the major supermarkets, you've got to supply them enough to make it worthwhile for them to, they want you to supply them over a number of months, not just one here and one there.
Unlike Greg, Eddie places the #1 blame for climate change worsening on the Australian federal government's actions. The government in recent years has rolled out tree plantation rebates, energy schemes, and in its latest move, pledging $500 million to protect Australia's Great Barrier Reef. But for Eddie, this isn't enough. He says one plan, the solar panels rebate in 2007, was just the latest misguided example. The government doled out rebate cuts to homeowners and farms who installed solar.
Everyone they got a rebate, actually put power back into the grid system. They got paid for it. Then after 5 years, 10 years, the rebate cut back. Then after 10, they said stopped it altogether because then they wouldn't pay you for the power you put back in the energy system. Then they realised they couldn't justify rebuilding their generating plants because everybody had their own power and they weren't getting the revenue they were. Who saw that coming?
The government hoped mandating that farmers use solar energy would help the environment and bring down costs. But in the end, the solar ended up costing farmers too much.
Our electrical prices are skyrocketed, and every summer when we have a heat wave and everyone turns on the air conditioning, we have shorter power here on the eastern seaboard of Australia. So they've made a real mess of it.
Eddie also says the government scientists mandating changes never visit his farm to see firsthand what's going on.
You know, you talk to any scientist, they say that's what a scientist is. We prove things that we think is right, but until we prove it beyond to a reasonable doubt, within a reasonable doubt. But later on, theories are proven to be wrong. Getting stronger all the time because no one's doing anything about it.
But while the farmers of Western Australia like Eddie and Greg have noticed climate change, not all agree that it is man-made. One such farmer, Victor Rodwell.
I'm a skeptic of the climate change because I think we haven't been around long enough to see the changes in the climate. You know, we talk about 100 years of climate change. Climate's been changing a lot longer than 100 years.
Victor lives 2 hours north of Greg and Eddie in a city called Bunbury. Victor was the former chairman of Western Dairy, the governmental authority overseeing dairy production in Western Australia. Like the other farmers, Victor came into farming because his father was unwell and he was the only one who could take it over. He started farming after high school. Initially, they only had 40 cows. Now, there's 800. Victor has been involved in farming research since he was 18 years old to stay on top of environmental changes.
From the age of about 18, I had always had questions. I wanted to learn if something happened, what caused it and what changed. So I was very lucky to be involved with the research and the ag department people in our state. And from 18 or 17, 18, I was lucky to partner up and do a lot of research on our own farm.
In this time, he has seen weather changes occurring.
We've gone from the seasons being, you know, there was a definite change. Springtime was springtime, autumn was autumn, summer was summer, and they were fairly, I suppose, consistent. Really over the last probably 10 years, things have changed, but our business has changed a lot as we've grown. For me, the biggest challenges within our business in the last 10 to 15 years has been risk management.
For Victor, risk management means observing the changes provoked by the climate in his farm and addressing them directly.
For me, one of the biggest risks is running out of feed. So yes, you can buy feed, but you can't always buy the quality of feed that you really want for your livestock. The season went from a really good season to when the rain stopped. This particular year, the rain stopped at the end of September. And so our spring was very short and we had way too many cattle. I was trying to build my numbers to grow our business and I got caught short. And I had way too many cows and it cost me $300,000 in boarding feed, extra feed on top of what we'd allowed for.
In Bunbury, where Victor lives, the temperatures are 20 Fahrenheit higher than down south in Albany, where Greg and Eddie live. Victor was the first in the state to bring in technology that measures the water levels throughout the day and warns him when it is low.
This is variable rate technology. It's relatively new in Australia. This system has allowed us to take our main pivot, which is 100 hectares, and manage the water use. And what it's done is like our cows, we need consistency. So this has allowed me, this here is just the map, the current map that we're using for the water. And this has allowed me to level out, and my pivot is far more consistent than it has been in past years.
What Victor means by a pivot system: when the technology starts warning him that water in the farm is going down, or the soil isn't fertilized enough in specific areas for crops to grow, he just has to change the settings within the app for it to spray more water in those areas. The system runs 24 hours. All Victor has to do is keep watching the levels and pressing the button for it to move to that area. But Victor cannot press a similar button or technology to save his cows suffering from heat stress. In 2017, Bunbury experienced 10 days of hot spells beyond 98.6 Fahrenheit. Victor has found creative ways to work around this.
For us, we bring them in once temperatures get at a certain level, and they go under fans and water and shade with access to feed.
Okay, and then I saw your sprinklers yesterday.
Sprinklers, yeah.
Just outside the
Yeah,
milking.
sprinklers in the dairy, we have fans, and then we have an undercover feed area. So, but because our numbers are small, we're able to handle that well enough. I'd like to do more, but at this stage, that's what we have.
Victor said he has started this system recently, and it has helped decrease cow deaths and cow eye cancers as a result of the sun and heat stress. Still, the effects of heat stress are found in several cows in the farm. One got sick while giving birth due to 95 Fahrenheit on that day and is now too weak to be milked. The vet is coming to put her down. The other has terminal eye cancer. She will be put down too.
The latest technology we're using with our breeding is genomics, and we're testing our heifers to try and select our top group of animals consistently. So select for their ability to manage variability. So we're looking for health traits, production traits, fertility traits, all these different things that we can select for now within dairy. Now they're also selecting for heat tolerance trait.
Climate change is a very big, complex, controversial issue. On these farms in Western Australia, the impacts can be seen firsthand. For the cows and the farmers, the hope is very much that their actions right now will help keep their businesses afloat for generations to come.